They discovered 6 shocking gospels the church tried to bury. Uncover the forbidden secrets. Few knew what truly happened that night. In a dimly lit cave, hidden beneath layers of sand and time, dusty scrolls lay waiting. These weren't ordinary texts. They whispered secrets of the early followers of Christ, unfiltered, raw, and unpolished. The air was thick with mystery, tinged with a sense of urgency. Unbeknownst to the world, the voices of those long gone were about to rise again. In the heart of ancient Judea, rumors of hidden gospels circulated among the faithful. Each one held tales that could challenge everything they thought they knew. Would they shatter the very foundations of belief? As the sun sank, casting long shadows over the hills, scholars gathered in secret. They lit candles, illuminating their faces, eyes wide with anticipation. The atmosphere crackled with that unshakable tension. Would tonight reveal the forbidden that lay dormant for centuries? The text spoke of miracles untold, a young Jesus, wise beyond his years, yet wrestling with doubt. They hinted at a Mary Magdalene who was more than a figure of redemption, she was a leader in her own right. Did she hold the key to the true essence of faith? The debates ignited like wildfire. Questions flickered in the air, unanswered and unsettling. How long could the church silence these revelations? The walls seemed to close in, drowning the room in a haunted silence. As hands trembled over the aged manuscripts, eyes darted nervously. Outside, the quiet night was pierced by rustling leaves and distant howls. Were they being watched? And who would dare confront the powerful? For every truth uncovered, a multitude of consequences awaited. Each scroll was an enigma, a potential bombshell ready to explode. What if these hidden gospels held the answers to faith itself? To the stories that shaped generations? The risk was palpable, the weight of history lay heavy in that cave. Blood, sweat, and tears were woven into each fragile parchment. And as the candles flickered, shadows danced, revealing fleeting glimpses of deep convictions and deep fears. Would the truths uncovered bring enlightenment or destruction? Would they walk away unscathed? The air thickened with apprehension. So many questions loomed, and the clock ticked with ominous insistence. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. In the stillness of the cave, an unspoken anticipation gripped the congregation of scholars as they contemplated the first scroll. Its edges were frayed, and the ink had faded in places, yet the words still held the power to stir the spirit. Carefully unrolling it, they revealed a narrative different from the familiar texts they cherished. This account spoke of a time before the miracles, of a young Jesus learning from the world around him, not just divine precepts but also the humanness of those he would come to lead. The verses painted a picture of Jesus at the age of 12, not merely sitting amidst elders in the temple but actively engaging with them. Questions flowed like water from his lips, a young boy's inquiries sparking debates that drew laughter, furrowed brows, and deep contemplation. The elders were puzzled by his combination of innocence and wisdom. Who is this child? They whispered among themselves. His search for understanding made them reflect on their own beliefs. The scholars looked at one another, realizing that every question posed could open a door to deeper understanding or profound chaos. Then came the mention of Mary Magdalene, not simply as a follower, but as a confidant, a warrior, a voice for the voiceless. This scroll, unlike any they had seen before, outlined her role in shaping the narratives shared amongst early believers. It portrayed her not as a mere witness but as a lighthouse guiding those lost in faith's fierce storms. The implications were enormous. If her significance was as paramount as this scroll suggested, what would that mean for the church? Would it alter the very fabric of established doctrine? More questions raced through the room, fraught with the weight of potential backlash. As scholars debated the implications of every discovery, the shadows in the cave felt more alive, seeming to take form as the visions of the early followers danced before their mind's eyes. What had been forgotten could reshape not only history but personal destinies. Would they continue to unearth the layers of time or shroud the unsettling realities once more? Suddenly, an echo reverberated from deeper within the cave, an unsettling reminder that they were not alone. A flickering flame extinguished for a moment, drawing gasps from the group. In their hearts, a fear unfurled. Had someone followed them? Or were the guardians of old keeping watch, unwilling to let these secrets come to light? What would unfold if they continued this exploration? Would the knowledge they gained serve to unite the faithful or divide them further? They sat in the uncertain space between revelation and fear, pondering what lay in the next scroll. Each turn of the parchment was a whisper of possibilities, resonating with questions of faith and legacy. In that tense atmosphere, one scholar voiced what lingered in many minds: if these truths can shake the very foundations of belief, should we pursue them or let them be? Is it our place to unlock these forbidden secrets? The flicker of candle flames danced more wildly, echoing the urgency of their inquiry. Each scroll was a new breath of life, a potent reminder of the choices that lay ahead. And as they prepared to unveil the next mystery, they found themselves wandering into the depths of not only the cave but their own hearts. What revelations lie hidden within, waiting to be uncovered, and would they come with a cost too great to bear? With the unsettling echoes still resonating in their ears, the scholars steadied their breath and faced the next scroll, its path obscured by uncertainty and wonder. As they gathered closer, the air thickened with anticipation. The flickering candlelight painted their faces with shadows that seemed to whisper doubts and questions of their own. Unraveling the second scroll, they felt a weight, a heaviness imbued in the very fibers of the parchment. The words that emerged were entwined with suffering, a poignant narrative of an outcast, a leper whom Jesus had met during a wandering journey through the lands of Galilee. Unlike the well-trodden path of miracles and healings, this account spoke of desolation mingled with hope, revealing a moment where the divine intertwined with the deeply human. The leper's voice echoed through the words, yearning for touch, understanding, and acceptance. He lived in the margins, a haunting reminder of those who bore societal disregard, yet his faith sparked a confrontation of beliefs that would forever ripple through the hearts of those who witnessed it. "If you are willing, you can make me clean," he had declared through trembling lips, and the scholars felt the anguish of his isolation weigh upon them. As they absorbed the depths of the story, they recognized Mary Magdalene's name interwoven with this account. She was not a passive observer but instead emerged as a figure of strength, encouraging the leper to share his plight, guiding the hesitant crowd to embrace compassion when faced with stigma. The way she challenged social norms opened their eyes to the layers of bravery it took to stand against established beliefs. She was reshaping perceptions, creating pockets of love in spaces often filled with fear. Yet as they delved deeper into the scroll, a troubling revelation emerged. A voice, softly curling around the words, questioned the authority of such acts. Theologians, leaders, and followers had long wrestled with how to approach those deemed unclean. The scholars exchanged uneasy glances. Might this narrative stir divisions in their own understanding of mercy and grace? Outside the cave, the wind swirled, a reminder of the shifting tides that accompanied their investigation. They were stepping onto ground mapped by belief yet contested by the human experience. As a scholar and elder with a voice that quavered with the weight of tradition spoke up against further exploration, half-hearted protests echoed in the chamber. These words could fracture the foundations we stand upon, perilously close to stirring divisions, but was fear enough to silence inquiry? With this weighty discovery, they found themselves caught between the desire for truth and the reverberating anxiety of potential upheaval. Was it right to question the collective memory of the community when great scholars fought hard to preserve it? As the flicker of hope began to dim under the shadow of apprehension, a question emerged: could they reconcile these revelations with their own faith, or were they embarking on a path that would leave them lost to the very stories they sought to preserve? The cavern seemed to tighten around them, the shadows deepening, reflecting their own internal conflicts as they braced themselves for what came next. Their hearts questioned the price of revelation. What truths must they be willing to confront to find true healing and love for the outcast? And, in uncovering the buried past, would they discover a bridge to a divinely inspired future or create a chasm too vast to cross? As the flickering light cast dancing shadows upon the rough walls of the cave, the scholars drew closer, their hearts entwined in a delicate balance between eagerness and apprehension. The third scroll lay waiting, its edges frayed and worn, each crease steeped in an unseen history. With tentative hands, they unfurled it, the scent of ancient ink filling the small chamber like a whisper from the past. What they found unfolded an account of a woman who encountered Jesus at a well, her life marked by isolation not unlike that of the leper they had just studied. Yet this narrative shimmered with layers of complexity and ambition. The woman, a Samaritan, engaged the wandering teacher in a dialogue that transcended their cultural divides, reaching deep into the heart of her struggles, her multiple husbands, her thirst for acceptance, and her longing for divine affirmation. As they read on, the scholars were struck by her courage. Challenged by societal condemnation, she did not shrink back. Instead, she confronted the very source of her disillusionment, risking exposure to share her truth with a stranger who offered her living water. The invitation, "Go call your husband," thrummed with an authority that resonated with a deeper understanding of connection and forgiveness. "I have no husband," she replied, the weight of her truth laid bare. Her story, too, revealed Mary Magdalene's name woven intricately into the narrative. She had traveled far beyond physical boundaries, becoming an advocate for those marginalized and shunned. The scholars came to realize that Mary's legacy was not solely rooted in her defiance of stigma but rather in her fervent engagement with truth. Each woman's voice echoed within the scroll, calling out to those who had previously turned away, urging them to examine their own hearts and beliefs. As they delved deeper, a feeling of unease settled in. The narrative spoke not only of acceptance but of a redemptive understanding that beckoned the faithful into uncomfortable territories. The very notions of purity and worthiness that had been entrenched in their traditions began to unravel. The leper's plead for cleansing and the Samaritan woman's yearning for wholeness collided, sharing a common thread, the relentless quest for love, identity, and belonging. But as they contemplated these intertwined tales, a new question rose among them. A disquieting whisper echoed in their minds. What did it truly mean to be clean? Was it merely a state of being, or did it require the unearthing of hidden truths within their own lives? The scholars, once merely keepers of sacred knowledge, now found themselves tangled in the moral complexities that adorned each story. Could the act of understanding and bearing witness create transformative pathways, or was their exploration merely retracing steps already taken, a futile exercise bound in the shackles of tradition? Outside, the wind howled in discontent, sending chills through the cave, a reminder of the currents of change sweeping through their very souls. As they prepared to move forward to the next scroll, their hearts beat heavy with a revelation that lay just beyond their grasp. Would the courage of the leper and the Samaritan woman inspire them to reshape their approach to faith and community, to embrace the marginalized and challenge the unspoken rules that governed their existence? Or would they remain entangled in fear, allowing their interpretations to stagnate and fracture the very heart of what they sought to preserve? In the silence that followed, heavy with the amalgamation of these stories, the scholars transformed their contemplations into a single resonating question. What must we confront within ourselves to embrace the essence of grace so that we may truly become instruments of healing in an often broken world? As the flickering light trembled in the cave, their breath mingled with the dust of ages, the scholars unrolled the fourth scroll, intrigued yet apprehensive. The delicate fibers whispered as they stretched under their cautious fingertips, revealing a narrative that converged upon a darkened night where the shadows seemed to breathe life. There, amidst the uncertainty, a deeper understanding awaited them, inviting them yet again into a mystery that lay just beyond human comprehension. This scroll spoke of Nicodemus, a Pharisee, a man of status and strict adherence to the laws that governed their lives. He sought Jesus under the cover of night, when the world's censure would not judge him for harboring curiosity about this radical teacher. As the words unfurled, the scholars were struck by a poignant contrast: the leper, marked by physical affliction, and Nicodemus, burdened by the weight of societal expectations, both yearning for truth yet bound by their circumstances. "Rabbi," he began hesitantly, "we know you are a teacher come from God, for no one can do these signs that you do unless God is with him." The scholars exchanged glances as they absorbed the gravity of his admission. Here was a man entrenched in authority yet willing to risk it all for a moment of vulnerability. What a juxtaposition it was to witness the rich and the poor, the marginal and the privileged converge in a quest for divine encounter. Jesus, however, did not respond as expected. His words were cryptic and profound: "Unless one is born again, he cannot see the kingdom of God." Nicodemus, bewildered, could only ponder what such a rebirth meant, caught in the tension of his understanding and the spiritual revolution unfolding before him. The scholars found themselves wrestling with this image of renewal, wondering what it meant to be reborn in a world clinging so tightly to tradition. As they probed deeper, they noticed a subtle shift in the narrative. It was not merely about physical rebirth but also a transcendence of the spirit. Nicodemus was challenged to strip away the layers imposed by his identity and status. This encounter illuminated a harsh truth: the kingdom of God was not defined by human constructs or accolades but rather by an open heart willing to embrace the unknown. Yet, how could a man of the law set aside the very foundation of his existence to embrace the fluidity of grace? The scroll continued, leading them to the heart of Jesus' message: the divine love that transcends any earthly boundary, even the rigid walls that Nicodemus had built around himself. The scholars felt the gravity of the moment. Could a single conversation bridge the chasm between societal norms and the radical inclusivity of the divine? With each word, the weight of their inquiry deepened. They sensed a connection between the fears that Nicodemus embodied and those bound by stigmas in their own lives. What was it that kept them rooted in fear? Were they too afraid to confront their own shadows, to engage in their own transformative journeys? They could not help but reflect: were they willing to let go of their own identities fashioned by tradition, to be reborn into a community that embraced all seekers, regardless of their past? As the night deepened in the cave, a silence enveloped them, a pause filled with both reverence and uncertainty. Where would this understanding lead them? Would they possess the courage to confront the constructs that limited their faith and the faith of those around them? In the flickering glow of the candlelight, they grappled with the true essence of rebirth as Nicodemus had: what it meant to be cleansed and renewed in the presence of divine love. Would they emerge from the cave into the world, transformed and renewed, or would they remain hidden, unwilling to confront the depths of their own souls? The question lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of potential: what does it truly mean to be reborn in the Spirit, to embrace the transformative power of grace in a world that often retreats into the safety of familiarity? As the scholars continued to decipher the scroll, the cave pulsed with an unseen energy, as if the very stones themselves breathed in anticipation of the truths yet to unfold. They turned their attention back to Nicodemus, their minds racing with questions sparked by his encounter with Jesus. The words unfurled before them, inviting them deeper into the mystery of vulnerability and transformation. They learned of Nicodemus's struggle after that fateful meeting, marked by a hidden yearning that rarely surfaced amidst the hierarchical pomp of his position. While others celebrated their status, he was beset by questions that gnawed at his conscience. Was there more to faith than adherence to the law? Was there a deeper invitation waiting for him in the whispers of night? Jesus' declaration about rebirth lingered in his mind like an unfinished symphony, haunting yet beguiling. The scroll took them through a tapestry of Nicodemus' nights, where doubt and reflection became his companions. In those moments, he began to see the hypocrisy that pervaded the religious elite: the dismissal of the outcasts, the disdain towards sin rather than compassion for the sinner. The scholars felt a shift within themselves. Did they, too, allow their beliefs to blind them to the very essence of love and grace that Jesus embodied? The cave seemed charged with an air of sacred tension, compelling them to engage with the discomfort of their own spiritual identities. The scroll continued to reveal successive moments of Nicodemus's life. He found steps leading him to the marginalized: a woman at a well, a man cast out for his infirmities, conversions igniting hope in the dark corners of society. He was drawn to these figures, feeling in their stories the resonance of his own quest for understanding and belonging. One encounter stood starkly framed in the scroll: Nicodemus meeting with a blind man left destitute by his condition, shunned and forgotten. As they spoke, the blind man confessed his despair, echoing Nicodemus's internal conflict. "I was born into this darkness," he lamented, "but is there a way to see the light?" Nicodemus pondered deeply on the mixture of despair and hope in those words. How could he reconcile the extravagant grace of Jesus with the rigid construct of the law he had devoted his life to uphold? The scroll brought them back to the cave, the vision of Nicodemus now grappling with a deeper revelation that unsettled him. Tempted to remain in the shadows of societal acceptance, He knew that choosing to step into the light meant risking everything he had built: his identity, his influence, his very standing among the faithful. The scholars felt the weight of such a choice, reflecting on the battles that waged within their hearts as they endeavored to uphold traditions while also yearning for the expansive love that Jesus offered. Would they, like Nicodemus, dare to confront the jarring dichotomy of faith, safety, and tradition versus the radical call of love? The flicker of the candle seemed to mirror their own doubts, casting shadows that danced with both fear and hope. Were they too caught in the web of expectations that dictated how faith should look, how faith should feel? In the deepening silence, they began to realize that the scroll was revealing more than Nicodemus's story; it was laying bare their own. They were called into the very struggle of the man who sought the truth amidst the encumbrances of his life, a struggle that mirrored their own fears of transformation. With each passing moment in the dark cave, renewed questions arose, echoing amidst the stones. Was it possible to embody both tradition and transformation? How might they navigate the journey of faith without losing the essence of who they were? Could they allow grace to reshape their identities and open their hearts to a broader narrative of divine connection? The air was thick with possibility yet tinged with uncertainty. Would they emerge from the depths of history into the light of understanding? Would they find the courage to embrace the uncomfortable and welcome the transformative power of grace into their own lives? As the flame flickered and danced, a single lingering question hung heavily in the air: was rebirth merely a theological concept, or could it manifest in the very core of their being, altering not just their perspectives but the world around them? As the flame flickered and danced, the scholars' reflections deepened, as if coaxed by the very essence of the cave itself. Shadows wavered on the walls, echoing the tumult of the thoughts scrambling within them. Nicodemus's journey unveiled places of light and darkness, not just in his life but in the fabric of belief itself. Could they find their own path through the maze of expectations that had ensnared them for so long? The scroll's whispers grew stronger, carrying them further into Nicodemus's world. They learned of an encounter that shocked yet intrigued him: an encounter with a woman caught in sin, dragged before him by an angry mob. The tension was palpable as the throng demanded judgment, expecting quick retribution for her transgressions. Nicodemus, witnessing the venom in their eyes, felt a pull within him, a longing for mercy that clashed with the desire for strict justice. "What do you say?" the mob demanded of him, their voices a cacophony of righteousness and indignation. Faced with a choice, he thought of the words Jesus might say, the grace he held within him. Instead of offering condemnation, he felt a wellspring of compassion rise. "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone," he spoke, his voice steady but laced with apprehension. In that charged moment, silence fell like a weight. The eyes of the crowd shifted, their fervor faltering as they met one another's gazes, each contemplating their own faults. One by one, the stones fell to the ground, their collective wrath dissipating in the presence of vulnerable humanity. The scholars leaned in, their hearts racing as they realized that Nicodemus was not merely defending her, but was also confronting his own adherence to the law that had kept him shackled. An internal conflict mirrored in the hearts of the scholars themselves. What would it mean for them to abandon stones of their own preconceived notions of faith, rigid doctrines, judgments forged in fear? The cave hummed with urgency as they sensed that their studies of Nicodemus' story were peeling back layers of their own identities, revealing the stone walls they had built around their hearts. Could they, too, dare to let go of their stones and embrace a message of grace, perhaps even laying down the burdens they had carried for far too long? But the scroll held yet another revelation. As he watched the woman rise, her eyes flooded with gratitude mingled with uncertainty, Nicodemus felt the weight of destiny resting upon his shoulders. She asked him, "What will become of me?" Her question was one of existential dread, but it echoed a deeper truth: the quest for identity after being marked by sin. Nicodemus pondered the nature of transformation. Was it merely a gaining of status or a shedding of identity fraught with guilt? The scholars exchanged glances, wrestling with thoughts that mirrored their own uneasiness. Had they not also participated in dismissing those deemed unworthy? In their quest for knowledge and clarity, had they overlooked the grace that came with acknowledging the shared struggles of humanity rather than just mentioning them in academic discourse? Amid the evocative tension of the cave, they considered the question poised before them, an exploration not only of others' journeys toward rebirth but of their own. Would they emerge from the shadows of their own rigid beliefs, embracing the call to compassion that Nicodemus had found in his most vulnerable moment? Would they allow the transformative voice of Jesus to resonate deeply, reshaping their spiritual identities in the process? The cave pulsated with the weight of unknowns, filled with sacred anticipation. Was forgiveness merely a chapter for others, or was it the key that could unlock the prison of their hearts? As the flicker of the candle began to dim, questions unfurled like petals seeking the sun. If they were to embody the grace they studied, what new narratives would they have to accept and embrace? Could they transform fear into love, judgment into understanding, and stones into pathways of grace as they walked their own journeys toward rebirth? The cave grew darker around them, the flames flickering casts drawing shadows that danced on the walls like memories waiting to be unshackled. In that hallowed space, the scholars hovered, hearts and minds ensnared by the life of Nicodemus, a man who had dared to step into the unknown. As the whispers from the scroll faded into a profound silence, the scholars felt a shift in the air. An ornate script emerged, its unfolding words inscribed with both urgency and wisdom, beckoning them to delve deeper into the heart of Nicodemus' story. His path had not only been marked by the shadows of judgment and mercy but also by the lingering question of purpose that tugged at his very soul. In those early dawns following the trial of the woman, Nicodemus found himself traversing the streets of Jerusalem with a renewed gaze, a soul alight with questions. What does it mean to truly believe? He wondered, and the question echoed like a distant drum summoning him to the heart of spiritual inquiry. The teachings of Jesus reverberated around him, yet he grappled with their implications. One evening, beneath a canopy of stars, he sought out the teacher whose humility had startled him into a new way of seeing. Finding him at daybreak, Nicodemus approached as shadows pulled away from the light. "Rabbi," he breathed, struggling with the weight of his thoughts, "how can one be born again?" His heart raced at the vulnerability of his inquiry, unsure of the answer he sought. Jesus gazed upon him with knowing eyes, yet his response instead unraveled further questions. Unless a man is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Each word stirred a cauldron of confusion and marvel within Nicodemus, questions flaring into existence: what rebirth looked like and how it could redefine his very existence. Meanwhile, the scholars found themselves entwined in this search for comprehension, feeling the tension rise between certainty and the unknown. They deliberated, asking if rebirth was indeed a shedding of past identities or if it signified a deeper transformation, one that might illuminate their paths without eradicating their histories. Like Nicodemus, were they not standing at a crossroads of understanding? "What births hope in the heart?" asked one scholar, her eyes sparkling with incitement. "Is it grace? Is it a willingness to accept the flawed beauty of our own narratives?" A palpable silence filled the cave, echoing the growing realization: Nicodemus' journey transcended mere law and doctrine, it was about unearthing the sacred within human frailty. The scholars felt a glimmer of recognition, acknowledging their own failures to extend grace, their struggles echoing Nicodemus' own, yet Nicodemus remained caught in a cycle of uncertainty. The identity he had clung to, a respected Pharisee, began to feel stifling. Each encounter with Jesus chipped away his rigid attachments, revealing a humbling truth: faith was less about hierarchy and more about the authenticity of connection. He found himself grappling with the weighty question: could he, a seeker of truth, lay aside the titles and judgments that no longer served his spirit? The flickering candle brought warmth only to illuminate the chill of doubt surrounding him. As he navigated his thoughts, he faced the shadows of his fears. What would happen if he surrendered everything he understood? Could his standing, his knowledge, his adherence to rigid laws give way to a more profound understanding of love and acceptance? In the cave, the scholars wrestled with an unsettling revelation. Transformation did not lie solely in external actions but in an internal awakening to God's enduring grace, challenging them to confront their own inhibitions. What if, by walking closely in the footsteps of Nicodemus, they might unearth unknown behaviors in themselves, the stones they held, the preconceived doctrines they cherished? Given the weight of these thoughts, they contemplated an unsettling truth: that true rebirth was not just a one-time act of faith but a continuous journey. If they too were to embrace the transformative essence found in humanity, were they ready to disrupt the steadfast beliefs that had previously guided them? Could they unfurl their own stones, embracing vulnerability as they sought to embody the radical love beckoning from the depths of Nicodemus' encounters? The cave whispered under their breaths, ripe with questions yet unanswered, urging them to wade deeper into the mystery of their own spiritual rebirths. In the quest that loomed ahead, would they find the courage to transform their fear into acceptance and their hesitations into a dynamic faith that embraced each moment of transformation? As dawn broke in Jerusalem, a soft golden hue washed over the city, restoring life to the weary cobblestones where shadows had previously lingered. Nicodemus, now frequenting the edges of understanding, felt the stirrings of hope mingling with the burden of expectation. The dialogue with Jesus had ignited within him a relentless curiosity, one that coaxed forth more questions than answers. He wandered toward the marketplace, where merchants called out to passers-by, their voices like rich fabrics layered in vibrant colors. Yet, weaving through the ordinary rituals of commerce, Nicodemus found his thoughts elsewhere, pondering the paradox of birth and rebirth, and how such concepts could intertwine with the teachings that destabilized him. "Rabbi, we must come to terms with the essence of faith," he mused, echoing the sentiments laid bare during their last encounter. "But to what end does this rebirth render us?" He reflected on the woman whom the Pharisees had nearly cast away, and in her plight, saw a mirror of his own struggles. Each human spirit bore the potential for rebirth, yet simultaneously embodied the weight of past choices. The marketplace vibrated with the energies of life, commerce profane against the sacred quest inside him. He felt eyes upon him discerning yet unyielding. How was he to communicate the depth of faith, a concept lurking beyond the whispers of the law? What provisions did the heart require to embark on this transformative journey, and how would the community who once revered him respond if he dared to defy accepted narratives? Meanwhile, the scholars in the cave absorbed the lingering echoes of Nicodemus's existence, piecing together the contours of a faith that both alienated and embraced them. "What is a gospel if not a revealing of hidden truths?" one scholar questioned, the flickering light illuminating her knitted brow. "Are we thwarting the very essence of compassion when we cling to singular narratives, denying the existence of other gospels etched in the experiences of those less visible?" These musings enveloped them in a palpable tension, igniting a fire for exploration. They recognized Nicodemus's journey mirrored their own quests for authenticity. If the rigid foundations were to shift, accepting the lesser-known truths of others and embracing the gospels uncolored by conventional wisdom, what might emerge from the shadows? As the sun ascended higher, casting light over their heads, Nicodemus reached an open space where those rejected congregated, awaiting acceptance. Faces of longing and despair met his gaze, yet among them, he spotted flickers of resilience and yearning community that echoed his own heart's desires, clamoring for recognition beyond societal definitions. Can one truly become whole in the sight of such rejection? He wondered aloud, his heart breaking open as he approached them. Yet, here lay a truth: the sacred repeated in hearts was not defined by titles rabbi, Pharisee, sinner, but by the essence of love that interconnected their stories, illuminating a path for all. Could love, then, be a gospel encapsulated by each encounter? Might it unlock previously hidden chambers within the soul, defying expectations and shattering chains? He felt the tremor of such possibilities coursing through him, an awakening of spirit that echoed the longing of the outcasts before him. As the scholars mulled over this tapestry of experiences in their own sacred space, they perceived the unexpected beauty in fragmented narratives. Does the light of understanding come from acceptance of varied truths? One posited. In acknowledging multiple gospels, could we kindle a flame of love that transcends indoctrination? As they ventured deeper into the labyrinth of their discussion, asking questions yet unanswered, they unearthed something precious, an awareness that rebirth beckoned beyond familiar shores, inviting them to dare to recognize the divinity cloaked within humanity's own fragments. In the swirling waters of discovery and longing, they paused to absorb the weight of their insights, hearts leaping at the potential of what lay ahead. Could love be the cue that released the chains binding them to rigid pasts? Would they have the courage to tread uncharted paths where acceptance reigned supreme, intertwining their narratives with those of the voiceless, crafting a new gospel destined to renew and reshape their roles in the unfolding story of faith? Once more, the cave fell into a contemplative silence, rich with questions unspoken. Would they choose to unravel the mysteries entwined within their faiths, welcoming the disruption needed to embrace a broader understanding of love, even if the path was laden with uncertainty. As the last flickers of candlelight danced upon the cave walls, the scholars felt an undeniable shift in the spiritual ether surrounding them. They had journeyed far into the depths of history and faith, grappling with the unexpected revelations from the scrolls that had illuminated their hearts and minds. Now, the weight of those discoveries hung poignantly in the air, ushering them toward what felt like a profound reckoning, a culmination laden with transformative potential. The fifth scroll beckoned to them, and as they hesitated, feeling the gravity of the moment, they unrolled it with reverence. Words spilled forth like a rushing river, revealing another layer of the divine narrative, this time focused on the people who walked alongside Jesus, the disciples who had drawn strength and wisdom from his teachings, but had also wrestled with their own doubts and shortcomings. The scroll painted a vivid picture of their discussions during long nights spent under starlit skies, their laughter mingled with tears as they questioned the path ahead. In those dialogues, themes of forgiveness, humility, and radical love emerged, concepts that, although central to Jesus' message, were often buried beneath layers of dogma and tradition. The scholars listened intently as they read of Peter's bold proclamations followed by moments of crippling doubt, of Thomas's yearning for proof and the quiet strength of those women who had continually embedded themselves in the fabric of his teachings. The threads of humanity woven throughout each disciple's journey illuminated a profound truth. They were not mere followers but representatives of every soul who struggled with the dichotomy of faith and fear. The scholars were transfixed, realizing that in the vulnerability of these early disciples lay the keys to their own spiritual transformation. The Gospels they had unearthed each carried a singular thread through the tapestry of faith, an essence of love that embraced all, encouraging them to confront their own biases, fears, and the labels they wore. Could it be, one scholar whispered, hardly able to contain the weight of the unfolding revelation, that these stories of doubt and struggle are sacred invitations for us? An urging to let go of preconceived notions about faith, to not just study the past but embody it fully. As they contemplated this notion, they were struck by the understanding that every story they had uncovered, every encounter with Jesus, Mary, the leper, the Samaritan woman, Nicodemus, and the disciples touched on an intrinsic human experience, a tapestry of brokenness and redemption that ultimately called for love and acceptance. With this new lens, the scholars' hearts began to shift, awakening a fresh perspective that spurred them forward. Drawn by an unshakable urge, they stood united, casting aside previous reservations. They resolved to champion narratives that honored the fullness of human existence, those voices once muffled by rigid interpretations of faith. They would carry forth the truths unearthed in the cave, illuminating paths toward understanding and compassion with radical love as their beacon. In that hallowed space, an indescribable peace enveloped them, a collective surrender to the divine call they had felt brewing beneath the surface all along. They understood that spiritual transformation was not merely an internal affair, but a collective awakening demanding action, a force that could embolden them to transcend their fears, challenge societal constructs, and embrace the marginalized. As the scholars prepared to emerge from the cave, each bearing the weight of these revelations, they knew they carried with them a responsibility. Guided by the stories of those who came before, they felt a renewed commitment to be bearers of light, conduits of grace in a world desperate for compassion. Stepping out into the brilliant light of dawn, the air thrummed with newly found purpose. They exchanged knowing glances, embracing the urgency of their calling. The moment they found themselves outside felt like the dawning of a new era. A wave of realization washed over them. Their journeys would be intertwined, not just with the rediscovered Gospels but with all who sought love and connection. Let us be the voices that once echoed silently, one scholar declared, a fire in her eyes. Let each of us share the stories we have uncovered to shatter the barriers of judgment and reignite hope. A chorus of affirmations surged through the group, each scholar echoing their commitment to embody the essence of grace that had unfurled itself within their hearts. And in that moment, as the sun blazed higher in the sky, illuminating the surrounding hills with a golden hue, the scholars set forth, transformed. They were no longer merely students of ancient texts, but messengers of the profound revelation that transcended to me, a revelation that echoed through the ages, that true faith blossoms in the embrace of love, acceptance, and the unwavering belief in the transformative power of grace. As they walked, their hearts resonated with the words of Jesus, "Love one another as I have loved you." It was a call to action, a call to be the embodiment of love in a world aching for redemption. The journey ahead was daunting, but they were bound together, and with Purposito bringing forth the light they had discovered and the Gospels they would no longer allow to be buried, that in the end, they understood that faith was not a destination but a beautiful, ongoing journey, one that invited every soul to share their light, their truth, and their struggles with the world, illuminating pathways for others to follow. Love had become their legacy, and as the horizon unfolded before them, they stepped forward, ready to change the world.